How's it going, everybody? This is the Uncanny Omar from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And today I've got a really cool graphic novel to talk about. But I'm not alone. I'm going to be talking to the masterminds behind this project. To my right is a gentleman that should need no introduction, but just in case, it's Yuri Lowenthal. And how are you, Yuri?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having us today. I just want to clarify, he's the mastermind. I'm just the hanger-on.
You're doing, were you in the middle of doing some voice recording and we put a stop to that?
That's right. You caught me in my booth. I had to stop everything for this show.
Well, dude, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Sure.
And then Keith, the actual mastermind,
Yes.
perhaps behind the project. Keith Arem, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having us today. We're excited.
It's my absolute pleasure. And then a good friend of mine, Chris Yates, is going to be here too to talk about his part in all of this.
How you doing, buddy? It's long overdue.
I am doing okay, my friend. I'm doing okay. Okay, so Keith, tell me a little bit about this project. And for people wondering, the Kickstarter went live today.
Just went live a few hours ago, and it's doing great. So yeah, it's exciting for us. This is a graphic novel that has been in development for a number of years. It started off as a pitch for a motion picture, and we were boarding out the original screenplay with Trevor Goring about 10 years ago. And unfortunately, we had a little bit of a tragedy in our studios here. I work in video games. That's how Yuri and I came together. And we had a fire here a little over 10 years ago, and it stopped everything. It stopped all of our other projects, our film, everything else. And after the fire, just recovery of the fire and where the economy was and everything else, the film kind of got put on hold. And Yuri and I ended up shooting a movie together called Phoenix Incident. And that was a great experience. That was the first film I had got to direct and write. And we decided that Frost was going to hopefully go back into production. And this little thing called COVID came along and kind of stopped a little bit.
You may have heard of it.
Our progress. Yeah, it may have affected someone near you. It was pretty tragic. And not only did it obviously affect the world around us, but it kind of changed the world of films and everything else. So Christopher Shai, who I had created Ascend with back in the day with Image Comics, we had started painting up a lot of images, and Yuri was so gracious to lend his likeness for this. We were doing another book called Dead Speed, and Christopher loved Yuri so much that we was like, we want to sort of use Yuri as, our main character for everything. So that really progressed into Frost. And Frost Road, over the past several years during COVID, we finished the book. And we were going to release it as a Kickstarter last year. And another project I was working on called The Exiled with Wesley Snipes and Adam Lawson took hold, and the book blew up. And we did our first really successful Kickstarter about a year and a half ago. And then with Wes being announced as Blade and coming back in Deadpool, we kind of changed our Comic-Con plans, and we kind of retooled the idea to use Frost as our first launch for PCB. And so here we are, day one, and this is our first real Kickstarter, doing it under our own umbrella, and it's been a great journey so far.
So you've worked in video games for a while. Is that what your background is, would you say?
Yeah, primarily. I started in the music industry. I was with Biohazard and Contagion back when I first started in the industry, and I was touring and doing angry industrial music, and opening up for Nine Inch Nails and Frontline Assembly and a lot of big industrial bands. And I started doing film soundtracks, and I was scoring movies, and then I got into scoring video games. And the whole time we were on tour, we were playing Street Fighter and other games. Yes. And now 30 years later, I'm directing Street Fighter. So it's been a great journey. And over the past 20, 25 years, worked on a lot of franchises, everything from Call of Duty and Titanfall and Yakuza and Persona. And that's how Yuri and I came together. Actually, Yuri was working on Prince of Persia, and they were actually having him audition for another role. And Yuri and I ended up spending, I think, the next 4 hours after his audition just kind of bonding and becoming friends. And he's now the him and Tara, his wife, are godparents to our children, and we've been friends for decades now. So
in fact, I feel it's the time to add this, that tomorrow is our birthday. Keith and I actually share the same birthday.
That's wow! Right. Well, happy birthday, you two.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Okay, Keith, I got to ask the real question right now. Who's your main in Street Fighter? Who's your character that you use?
It's Honda. 100 hand slap, 100 all the way. I mean, I'm old school, and 100 hand slap, you could not stop that. We just dominate. But it's been nice because we've been working on it for the past 3.5 years for Street Fighter 6, and we're mainly doing all the commentators and all the new stuff. So I get to see a lot of stuff in production way before the fans see it, and it's so great to see the commentators freak out. So but yeah, I'm still old school. It's just amazing to see the characters live for so long.
Okay. And I will come back to you, sir. Chris, what part are you playing in all this, my friend?
So I'm playing the director of special projects and outreach. Basically, I'm going to be helping kind of run the Kickstarters and help Keith with these unique projects that he has, and kind of setting up these interviews and making sure, when we reach out to the community, that they kind of have like someone to talk to or someone to reach out to if there's any questions, or kind of keeping things on track when expressing kind of the resources and tiers we're offering to all the backers, and just trying to being that person, because sometimes with these Kickstarters it feels like you could be talking either directly to a very unique creator or a void, and we're just trying to always have the idea of someone being available to the community if they have any questions or things like that. So I will be doing all that communications.
But Chris is pretty humble to the fact that he's also a creator himself and has created some amazing stuff. He's got a book that's been in development that we're hoping to explore coming down the pipe pretty soon. And all this Kickstarter and all the relationships, and not just the interviews, but also just crafting our community outreach and what we're going to be doing as part of the campaign, and working with other people like yourself in the community. He's very well connected in his background in UTA and Disney. He's not sharing as much as he's humble, but he definitely is one of the best guys working in the industry right now.
And in a world of dominated by chatbots, just the idea of having somebody human on the other end of something like this is huge for me anyway.
Guys, my head's big enough as it is. All right, I don't need it to be any bigger. All right.
Well, Keith, I suspect that Chris might be a chatbot.
I was going to say, Chris, what they really are saying is you're just a step up from a chatbot.
Fair enough.
I'm kidding, dude. I love you. Yuri, I don't even know where to start talking to you, man. You've done everything. I'm sure everything has been asked about your roles as Spider-Man. Ben 10. I don't even know. Were you always a fan of your own voice?
No, I was never. Honestly, I was never a fan of my own voice. Growing up, whenever there used to be these things called answering machines, and that was often the first time somebody would hear their own voice played back to them, and every time I heard that, I was just sickened. I was like, oh my God, you sound like a little kid. It's terrible. You don't sound like an adult human being. And then I got into this part of the industry, and I started playing characters that sounded like little kids and not like adult human beings, and it became all of a sudden my voice became awesome. So to me, so it actually took forever for me to be able to stand my voice.
Oh my gosh. You've done anime, you've done video games, you've done animation here in America. And it's just your catalog is huge. Like your library of things. I think anybody can find your voice if they were to look at. Even I was thinking of things like oh my gosh, here's Greenwood, for example, which is like a random, I'm sure you've never been asked about that. I'm like, oh my gosh,
no.
90s anime I watched, and hearing your voice, I can't even remember who brought it. Might have been Anime Works that brought it over to America. But then you did the voice of Alucard in Castlevania Symphony of the Night, right?
In the Symphony of the Night remake, and in Super Smash Brothers,
And what's interesting is that Yuri is one of the most well-connected persons in the industry, not just for voiceover, video games, or anime or animation. He's a filmmaker, he's a writer, he's connected, he's done everything from not just podcasts and video dramas. He had one where he was an astronaut on a series, and it was one of the first things that was broadcast. That it was just amazing just to see the breadth of Yuri's work, and he's creative in all aspects. It's funny in our story, he's playing the model, right? He's our lead character, is his likeness. But we actually did some audio dramas and other things just so we could incorporate the brilliance of his performance, because Yuri is like the real deal, 360, everything creative comes out of Yuri.
Oh man.
At what point, what was it? I guess at some point in your life, you heard a voice and you thought, I'd like to do that. Was there a specific voice or character that you thought that would be pretty cool?
You know, I honestly, when I first got into acting, I did not even consider like voice acting seemed like this magical thing that was, while an acting career already seemed unattainable, like voice acting, I didn't even know where to start, and it seemed like only 5 guys had that job, and while I knew, for on camera stuff and for plays, you audition for the thing and you get the thing, and like I didn't even know where to start with voice stuff. So I came out to after years in New York doing experimental theater, I came out to Los Angeles to be a movie star like everybody does, and my wife was like, well, this movie star thing is rough going. Like, we're not movie stars yet. What we need to figure out some other way to, to try to use our acting and make a living besides, trying to make it on TV or in film. And she said, what about voice acting? And I'm like, well, at first I felt stupid because like I'm the resident nerd in the family. Like I grew up watching, cartoons and anime and playing video games. Like I should have thought of that first thing. But like I said, like it didn't even seem like a real thing that people could do. And she said, well, why don't we take a class? And so we did. And it opened up my whole world, and it's changed my life. It's been the best.
They've written a book, Tara and Yuri have written a book called Voiceover Voice Actor. And it's the go-to book for actors and people wanting to get into the industry, because they tell stories and share from other people in the industry just what it's like working in this industry. And I think you've had like 2 editions of it out, right?
Yeah. And we're actually, we're still getting it together now, just the whole tech of it. But we're going to be launching a class based on just sort of an online, self-led course based on the book soon, because enough people keep coming to us. They're like, do you teach classes? And we're like, no, that's kind of why we wrote the book. We really don't, it doesn't, fit our schedule, but we're like, oh, maybe we could come up with a way to do it. And we finally did. So that'll be coming soon.
That's spectacular.
Well, that is why he's here. We are going to be talking about a comic book, the graphic novel that is coming out. It's going to be on Kickstarter, and I have left a link in the description of the video, but also in the chat right now. So we heard a little bit about how you got, and happy birthday to you both, by the way.
Oh, thanks, Logan.
Awesome. And we heard about how Yuri got involved and how a little bit of the behind the scenes. But Keith, what is this book about? Like you said, it was supposed to be a movie, right? At first.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the story is really it's based on a lot of real things I was researching. I came from the music industry and was always terrified about the fact that sound could be a weapon, and the idea that how things in the ocean and whales and dolphins were beaching themselves and killing themselves because of sound. And I wanted to really bring that to a human level. And so Frost Road takes place in a small town called Frost Road. I had created the story with Brandon Humphreys, which is another writer creator I worked with in the game industry for years. And we had kind of started the basis of this script years ago. And as it evolved into what is now the graphic novel, it is sort of like I would say a zombie movie in reverse, because the story really follows a guy that wakes up behind the wheel of this car. He's crashed it into a tree in the middle of the forest, in the middle of nowhere. He's bleeding from his nose, and he thinks it's from the car crash, and he's injured. He finds a cell phone on the seat, but there's some weird signal that's blocking everything. And so he goes to the nearest town to get help. And on the way, there's fires burning out of control. Everyone seems to be gone. A deer or an elk comes out of the woods, and it's also bleeding from its nose. And for a moment, they have a a connection, and then suddenly this thing rears up and starts bashing its head into a tree and takes its own life in front of him. So obviously something's happening. And in the first few pages of the book, you realize that like this might be a terrorist activity, this might be a bomb, a plague, we don't know. But as he finds this town of Frost Road, the whole town has just wiped themselves out. It seems like it's been at their own hand. And so it becomes this psychological thriller because the survivors he finds are either immune or not. And the ones that are not are somehow being affected by the waves or anything that's attacking this town. And Yuri's character, Chris, seems to be immune to this and doesn't see it, can't hear it. But anyone who is affected really is a danger to themselves and anyone around them. So they have to basically take these ticking time bombs out and get them out of Frost Road. And so it becomes like a zombie movie in reverse, in a sense, instead of typical survival horror that you would see like in The Walking Dead or other things when there are these onslaughts of zombies. They're literally taking these people out and trying to protect them from themselves. And the fact that no one trusts each other and knows what their connection is to Frost Road becomes really the mystery. And so people who like Silent Hill and The Last of Us and Quiet Place, you know, it's very much that aesthetic, and the artwork and everything is so entrenched in Christopher Schei's artwork. It's got this dreamy, very cool painterly kind of vibe to it, but still real in some respects. And that's where Yuri and Chris Alex and Etta Ross came in to really help us keep the characters consistent. So it feels like a film, but it very much plays like a really great horror graphic novel.
About the approach when it comes to the art, about the artist and how you're visualizing this.
What I loved is I grew up with books like Arkham Asylum and books that everything was hand painted. You know, it was just like so amazing to see the level of artistry where, and I love all sorts of comics and other things, but the painterly style, especially I read things like Heavy Metal magazine and everything, you know, the art style, and a lot of these artists internationally just put so much love into every panel. And I thought the idea that if you could do something sequential and painted, you bring together the best of both worlds, that every page looks like a cover. And so that was the approach. And Christopher and I did that on Ascend. And it was such a great experience. And you know, we worked on that book for a number of years, and it was so successful for us that we've always wanted to continue working together. And so when we started to use the reference materials, I would go out and find locations and other things I could photograph to kind of give inspiration for the world. But when it came to the characters, I went to Yuri and I said, Yuri, I said, man, I, you know, besides the fact that I love working together, I think that you kind of embody this character and what we want to do. And when we did this other book, Dead Speed, which we'll share with you, Yuri and I mean, we went all over Los Angeles. We went to underground tunnels. Yeah. We went to bridges and dams and got into costume and did stuff in the pool. I mean, it was just crazy. And in cars and shotguns and Yuri just, I mean, it's just, if you just look at him, I mean, he is just not just a rock star, but he is the movie star that, you know, he was always intended to be. And so to see him in these stories.
That's why I came on the show today, is for somebody to finally say that, Keith. Thank you.
Great. You've made it. You've made it. This is it. You've got my validation. and it's awesome. And the best part is to play with friends. I think that's the biggest thing in this industry, because we're all creators in our own right, and we're all trying to tell stories. And so the fact that you get to, you know, come up with these giant worlds, and you're, you know, painting stuff with your friends in them and turning them into audio dramas and comic books and graphic novels, and get to do it on a Kickstarter. I mean, this is a job, right? This is the best job you can have.
Okay, Yuri, I got to ask, how is it that they're using you as a reference for the main character, but you're actually having to pose, I assume, for a lot of these things that are happening in the panels?
Yeah, it's an interesting process, because, you know, Keith has it all in his head, and you know, he communicates, you know, at least as far as my part of the process was, he would communicate to Christopher by taking photos of, he would describe the situation to me and we would play it out. And I mean, did we shoot some video too? Did you ever pull still frames from video? That
was the best thing. Instead of taking still frames, was that we could actually get motion by running and doing things, and so that it actually feels like you're actually engaged.
So he would sort of shoot it like envision it almost like a movie, and then he would send, this to Christopher, and then Christopher would pull out the bits that made sense and that worked, I guess.
So when you're playing this character, I have to ask this: being an actor and voice actor, like, are you giving the character a voice when you're speaking lines in particular scenes?
I mean, sometimes, I would yell things out. Sometimes, I mean, we didn't shoot it, fully like that. I wasn't like, memorizing a script and then going out and doing the scenes like that. But yeah, sometimes it was vocalized, but most of the time it was, Keith with the camera going, okay, and then this happens. Oh, look, off to the side, and it's, he was sort of like Paul Verhoeven in, for like Starship Troopers, where he's just like, and now I'm a bug, and fight me. So I mean, it was basically like that, and only we were doing it in public and trying not to get caught by the police. Which is something that comes up a lot with me collaborating with Keith. It's a wonder we haven't.
We have broken many laws.
Yeah, some federal, actually, if I recall correctly.
I think a few federal ones included. Yes, that is going to haunt us on this show. But one of the things actually we did do is that because we had these great boards, and once we had the storyboards and we had Christopher's artwork, we actually started to put them together as animatics. And what that became was the origins of sort of like a motion comic and an audio drama. And Yuri then did come in and he did voice that. And the two tests that we did were so spectacular. In fact, that's one of the things.
The bridge scene, right?
The bridge sequence.
So you get to play your own character, Yuri?
100%.
Yeah, which is weird.
Did you have to audition where they're like, I don't know if you're fit for the role of this guy?
It happens, dude. I've literally auditioned for now, just all the stuff you said, that I've done up until now is just a cool way of, saying that I'm old. But I've gotten to a place where once or twice where I'll get an audition and it'll say Yuri Lowenthal type as the spec, and I've literally not booked those. When it says Yuri Lowenthal type, I never book it. But when Keith and I first met, it was for the second Prince of Persia game. I'd done the first Prince of Persia game, and they were literally having me audition for the role that I originated, and I didn't get it.
And you didn't get it,
and I didn't get it right. So that happens.
But you did come back on 3 and 4,
right.
or
3 and 5. Yeah.
3 and 5, right?
I do all the odd numbered
Yeah.
Prince of Persia games.
The funny thing is, the first voiceover I think we did together was for Digital Devil Saga, or it was the first one. And the funny thing was, the protagonist didn't have any dialogue, but he had the most blood-curdling scream. And Yuri's like, I can scream, and literally, it's probably one of my favorite screams in recorded history. And that was his main line, and he just like blew a vocal cord just screaming on Digital Devil Saga.
Somebody came up to me at a convention recently who's a huge Digital Devil Saga fan, and they had like fucking Surf tattoo, Surf SERPH, the character name. Not like it's crazy just to think that those games have made such an effect on people. But
Dude, I didn't know you were in Digital Devil Stats. I'm not saying you're old, and that's not even that old. That game is not that old.
No, we were in preschool when we did that.
Yeah.
Totally.
You've been at the game for a while now, not for so long. What was the? I do have to ask you this, Yuri. Voice acting has just blown up at conventions, right? It used to be like actors, wrestlers, comic book creators, but voice acting has become huge because these are the voices of a lot of people's youths. At what point did you get recognized that people started inviting you to conventions? Well, do you remember the role that you played and now we're gonna have Yuri Lowenthal?
I think it was Sasuke on Naruto. That was like because Naruto was so huge, and then sort of faded a little bit, but not totally, and then came back big during the pandemic. It was the one good thing that happened from COVID was that people were at home and Naruto was on Netflix, and people just binged 600 episodes, and it's back, which is great. Like that, I mean, I would say like Sasuke is the character that people ask me to sign for most
Mhm.
You know, the only one that has come closer is probably, you know, about equal with Sasuke, Spider-Man. And that's saying how big that show is, or that, you know, that character is.
Yeah, I don't see people asking for here's Greenwood.
Right?
That just shows my age.
You know, what's funny is my son and I were playing Helldivers like crazy, and we started playing it. And it's funny because I called Yuri because, I mean, we only play with one voice type in that game, and that is Yuri. Every single person that plays in the game has to play as Yuri. It's like, it requires firepower, and it's just such an amazing, fun game. But to hear Yuri on a daily basis just yelling out and screaming, "My arm!"
Right, sweet liberty, my leg. Yeah, yeah. That's the one where people go, "Oh my God, is that Spider-Man?" Yeah.
Wait, okay, yeah. Now that we live in the age of like digital, right, like phones and stuff, what if people ask you to do on like voicemail? Have you had those kind of conversations all the time?
Yeah, my you know, because I'll go to conventions and I may, you know, sign stuff, but sometimes people say, "Hey, will you record this thing for me? Record that thing for me." It is honestly one of my favorite uses of my, you know, limited superpower is, you know, getting like dad points and mom points for friends of mine. They're like, "Hey, my kid plays, you know, this game, or I want my kid to clean his room. Will you record a message from Spider-Man saying he's got to clean his room?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I will." And then of course they're like, you know, "Mom, you know Spider-Man?" She's like, "Yeah, I do." Which doesn't work on my son anymore. My son's over it, but that's okay.
That's my dad.
So he's caught on to you, huh?
Yeah, but you know, the only time it ever gets him a juice anymore is like with his friends at school. Like he doesn't think it's cool anymore, but if his friend at school is like, "Hey, I heard your dad was on Naruto," he's like, "Yeah, my dad's on Naruto." You know, and that's his flex. So
it, like, when doing something like animation that has had previous voice actors, is that something that you did when you would get a role? Would you listen to the Japanese voice actor? Like,
yeah, that's always part, and I know Keith can speak to this too because he knows that process really well. They always have us, not just for timing purposes, but just for matching, you know, the emotional, you know, part of the performance, and it's never just from scratch. Like I would argue that we always listen to the Japanese performance right before we do the line. We'll listen to it in Japanese first, and then we do our version in English. And sure, we leave our you know, stink on it, but you know, put our own spin on it. But I think, you know, we owe it to the original performance, and it helps the process along too.
And a lot of those companies are casting tonally, right? So they're listening to the orchestra of voices that they had in the Japanese version, and they very much, when they're casting, not just from a performance standpoint, but tonally want to have a very similar aesthetic in the Western versions of that. And Yuri's voice is like crack for Japanese dubs because he hits the sweet spot that. Sorry, was that PG? But his voice is just perfect for that sort of orchestral composition because and also I should mention Yuri speaks fluent Japanese as well, which is always a great treat. So sometimes when they're trying to explain something in Japanese, when we have a client and Yuri's like starts to respond back in Japanese, it kind of like raises some eyebrows, and people are like, "Oh, you understand what we were saying."
That's I've almost gotten into trouble a couple of times. I used to think that it would be cool to surprise them with that later on down the line, and now I realize that I introduce it either right at the very beginning or not at all, because all they're thinking, if I do it later, then all they're thinking at that point is, "Oh shit, was I saying was I talking trash about him in Japanese?" And he knew, you know, the entire time, and it doesn't make for a good working relationship.
I have you ever come across videos of watching the Japanese and voice actor and thinking to yourself, "Man, that's gonna break my voice"? And I think of like roles like Simone in Tengen Toppa Gurren, which by the way is one of my favorite.
It is the greatest. It is the show that I always recommend to people. Whenever anybody says, "Hey, I know you're into anime. Do you have any recommendations?" That is always the first show I recommend.
Yeah.
It's so
sorry,
good.
I geeked out a little bit internally.
No, feel free. And
Damn,
and
it's such a good show, dude.
and that they came back after 15 years last year to have us finally dub the movies was insane, and it made me so happy. But I mean, every now and then, I mean, and Keith knows this, certain types of games and certain types of roles or shows will definitely be taxing on an actor's voice. And I'm I mean, we've done enough Call of Duty games together to.
Well, the reason I brought up Gurren Lagann was I remember I had only watched it in Japanese, and my friend Maddie was a huge fan of the American dub. And I was like, "There's no way the American dub can recapture the Giga drill break. Like it's just gonna break somebody's voice."
Yeah.
But we did end up watching the movies in English I had never seen it in English up until last year.
Yeah, because we only dubbed it last year.
Yeah, Matt, props
after
to you,
15
man.
years. I don't know how that happened, but I'm glad it did.
So that's freaking awesome. So let's bring it back to the book. How long is this book going to be, Keith? And what tiers are there for the Kickstarters?
So the books, it's a 250-page hand-painted book. It's a hardcover book, which is beautiful. Mm-hmm. And it's just the kind of thing where even if you write a script for 90 pages, it's still a few hundred pages when you paint the whole thing out. So it's beautiful. And we did a special acrylic cover that looks kind of like Frost. We're actually we're prototyping it right now, and this thing is beautiful. So it kind of looks like it's frosted glass, and you're gonna be able to see the title through inside. So we've been experimenting with just having a really beautiful coffee table book. So the book's finished, which is nice. So we're not raising money for the Kickstarter to finish the book. It's literally just for us to get into printing and getting this out for Comic-Con. So the main tiers are for the hardcover and for the acrylic slipcase that we're doing. And then one of the big things that we're doing, and this is something that Chris was really instrumental in helping us kind of bring out, and also the team at Kickstarter, is that we wanted to give back to the community, because we're all creators, and we wanted to support other creators who, look at us and our years in the industry and ask, how do you get into this? And how do you get into creating a book or making a film or working on a game or doing voice acting or doing an audio drama? So the higher tiers, beyond just the basic book, we're doing meet and greets. We're doing mentorship classes. We're doing master classes. We're going to do some panels. We're doing a tour here of PCB in Los Angeles. And the idea is for not just fans who love what we're doing, but also creators who just want to get started and want to have a art portfolio review with Christopher Schei or with Trevor Goring. Or just to find out what it is like behind the scenes, or kind of like what we're talking about here is just all the stories and other things we do and how you get started in the industry. So we felt that like the platform of Kickstarter, instead of just only doing merchandise and other things to support a new property like Frost, we have a much better opportunity to give back to our community. And actually some of our higher tiers are taking some of the proceeds from our raise and investing in other Kickstarter creators as well. And so we're working really closely with Kickstarter to be able to do that. And, Chris has been helping us kind of build this whole campaign. And over the past month, our pre-show campaign has been sort of identifying what this campaign is going to look like.
And Chris might be able to answer this one then. How far into going into the Kickstarter and the Kickstarter coming to an end can people expect their books being shipped out? And I know a lot of things are up in the air right now with ports and printers and of course delays, but if everything goes according to plan, since the book is done, when can people expect it after the Kickstarter is over?
Yeah, we're expecting for July of this year. So that's going to be around the San Diego Comic-Con, maybe a buffer of August just to kind of give that like little bumper, but they can expect all this to be ready for summer. And that includes the master classes, the Q&As. We're going to try and get this done in a relatively short time, because we understand that a lot of Kickstarters, they're like, oh, it's 6 months, it's a year. And I know that's for it's different for everybody, but for us, we really wanted to try and have a quick turnaround. And as Keith said, we're raising the funds to basically print and do some fulfillment, maybe help ship the books to us so we can then get it out to backers in a timely manner. And one of the things why we decided to go with these classes was because shipping is insane. As we were talking, like it could cost $40, $50, $60, $100 to ship to Australia or wherever you may be in the world. And so to kind of fight that, pricing, we wanted to offer digital rewards. And so with one of the stretch goals, as Keith said, was giving back to community, we're also going to be partnering with Dead Meat. I don't know if you're familiar with them. personally, Omar, but they're a YouTube channel with 6.71 million, and they talk about horror and Chelsea and Jamie.
My brother loves Dead Meat. Yeah,
they're going to be if we're able to fund and do the initial 20,000 for our book, and then we're able to go to the next thing, with them and Yuri, we'll hopefully expand it to the next essentially next expansion of Frost Road, which is Blind Terror, and it's going to be really fun because we know some people. You can do the prints, the statues, and all those things, and they're all great. But we just want to do something a little bit different and try and give a full kind of 360 experience for people to kind of just get lost in a new IP in a new world. What do you say, Keith? Is that about right?
I think that's exactly it. And we really do feel that Kickstarter is an amazing community. And I think with distribution being sort of a little bit broken these days, not just in graphic novels, but you're seeing streaming in theaters and how people kind of get their entertainment. A lot of the creators who create all this amazing stuff really don't have not only a voice, but a really way to get their material out there. And one of the reasons that we really decided to partner up with Kickstarter and use this as our preferred platform is that we can get directly to our community, directly to our fans. We can take their feedback and really incorporate that into this project. And like Chris said, we want to have this out by San Diego Comic-Con and fulfill that. And people can meet us there in person. We're going to ship it out worldwide. And then we have a lot of really neat, exciting things right after that we're going to be announcing in July. So this is kind of the first step for PCB and what we're going to be doing with our other properties as well.
So, Yuri, have you done much graphic novel stuff, or is this the first?
I mean, I grew up reading them and collect them. But I'm glad you mentioned that, because while I'm involved in this way with this graphic novel, my wife Tara and I recently released a graphic novel that I was hoping I would get a chance to plug during this show.
Well,
it's
I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Right. Oh, and that's all the time we have. I'm sorry. It's a steampunk graphic novel called Topsy McGee and the Scarab of Solomon. It comes from a character that we sort of came up with years and years ago, and we used to just tell each other stories. Basically, Tara is like Topsy McGee. She's like sort of this Victorian era Indiana Jones. And once when I was going to a convention, I found an artist that I really liked, and I commissioned a picture of Tara as that character, and it kind of crystallized it for us in a way that it had not been before. And so we had a costume made for her to wear to, like the Renaissance Fair and, some other events. And then we're like, we should make a movie. And so we did a short film that's out there that's easily watched on YouTube called Topsy McGee versus the Sky Pirates. And I mean, it's in a very sort of old silent film style, trying to make look like it would have been made during that time. John Delancey plays her dad in it. It was super fun. And then we were like, oh, we should pitch this as a movie or a TV show. And we tried to get it out there as a TV show, but it was right about the time that ABC had their failed steampunk pilot, and steampunk was anathema at that point. And so that didn't work out. And we were like, but we still want to tell these stories. What is something that we can have a little more control over? And making a graphic novel was exactly that. And it took a long time because we were, self-financing and finding the artists. And, but we finally just got that out last year. And then people were like, well, what about an animated series? And I'm like, I should have thought of that first. So now we're putting together a pitch for it as an animated series as well. But making graphic novels is hard is basically what I was trying to say. But I love it, and it allows you to tell a story in a very different way than a lot of the other stuff that I work on.
How is co-writing it with your wife? Like, how did that work out? What part did you do? What part did she do? Did she take over dialogue, or how is that working with
yeah, when we write together, like she is like the font of ideas. And then I'm the guy who goes then and puts a lot of that stuff, to page. We work out everything together, and then I go in and write the dialogue and the stuff. So that was, and writing in that, like I had written screenplays and web series and stuff like that before. And it was a totally different format for me to try to figure out how to tell it, sequentially, in the way that it's you know, in terms of, you know, frames and frames for, you know, per page and splash pages and all that. So it was a bit of a learning curve for me. But I worked with, or we both worked with another couple that makes comics, Comfort and Adam, Comfort Love and Adam Withers, who we had met at a convention as well and had become friends with. And they basically shepherded the whole project from the beginning to the end, and really were a resource that without them we would not have been able to complete it at the level that we did.
So were you self-published then?
Yeah.
Or...
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, for better or for worse. You know, I've as soon as it came out, you know, people in publishing that are friends of mine were like, "Why didn't you bring this to us?" And I'm like, I don't know. You know, we didn't think of it. Like in the past, we've always like tried to, you know, do things through other people, and then you always have to wait, and people have to say no a lot. And so we've just gotten used to just saying yes to ourselves, which, you know, can sometimes be to the detriment because it's you can only get it on Amazon through, you know, publish on demand or, you know, print on demand. Comic shops can't order it because it's not through the, you know, so I can't. So like if I want it to be like over, you know, Golden Apple or, you know, House of Secrets, I have to get stuff printed and I have to bring it over there, and I have to, you know, go, please put this on your shelves, you know, which is not the way to sell a comic in stores.
It's funny when you work in the industry and you're working for all these like large corporations and large games and animated shows and films and television, but when you do your own thing, then you become very fiercely independent. And that's kind of the interesting part about, I think, all of our careers. Everyone I know in our circle of friends, you know, we're constantly birthing and creating ideas, and yet we're working on giant franchises that are doing, you know, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. And yet our own stuff, we're still out there, you know, doing Kickstarters and doing everything else there because we just kind of do it ourselves. And that's kind of what we love doing.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, a lot of creators, even, I mean, Chris knows this, a lot of creators have taken into just doing the crowdfunding way of making books and skipping the publishers. There's several reasons depending on who the creators are, but I've seen a lot of big names that have worked for the big two or Image Comics or Dark Horse just go ahead and do it through Kickstarter or other crowdfunding websites.
Yeah, I recently bought Matt Wagner's Dracula book that he did. That was Kickstarter. You know, I've loved Matt's stuff ever since, you know, the 80s to early 90s, you know, when he was, you know, doing Mage and, you know, all that stuff.
Dude, you like Mage?
Oh, dude, it's still one of my all-time favorites. All the Comico years were like, I mean, that was when I was deep, in deep.
People have no idea how long we waited for Mage.
Grendel, are you kidding me? Like, I was so sad when that Grendel, that live action Grendel project went away, but you know, Matt, I mean, you know, and a lot of, you know, people, you know, Steve Rude, you know, I grew up reading, you know, Nexus and, you know, all his stuff. I mean, it all seems like it's all crowdfunded these days. And that offers you two things. One, you know, control, and, you know, you get the money that comes in, hopefully. And also you own the IP, which I know in recent years has just been a killer for a lot of writers who come up with IPs, but they're working for one of the big two and they don't own the IP, you know?
Yeah, distribution is really a gatekeeper that like is the hardest thing for creators, because if all the money goes into distribution and warehousing and shipping and all the other costs that's there, and you not only lose the income from your book sales, but also the intellectual property, then where does it go beyond the book? You might have a great idea and it gets made into a movie, but you don't own it at that point. And I think a lot of creators are starting to realize that as much as it's impressive and it's a great badge of honor to be on one of these great large labels and imprints that people have grown up with and they know the names, but they don't really realize that the creators don't get to participate. And so I think Kickstarter is kind of the great equalizer right now, and allowing people like ourselves to go out there and get directly to the fans and let them support us, and then we get to own our own property.
It's crazy because I've looked at those people, you know, who created those characters that I grew up with, and you know, I before I got into this end of the business, I just had a picture of what their lives must be like, and the truth is, now I know a lot of those people, and they created some of the biggest characters, you know, in movies and comics today, and they still have to run GoFundMes like when they have medical stuff, and it just breaks my heart, you know, that that it works that way.
I mean, there is something to be said about these big million and billion-dollar movies. You know, somebody's making a lot of money. Unfortunately, it's the people that are getting these special things or created by that usually are not the ones that are making a lot of the money. But yeah, it's been that way for a long time. But I think we've come a long way since the days of, unfortunately, Bill Finger. You know, now we actually give credit to a lot of the creators. People know who they are. We're no longer doing unnamed colorists, unnamed inkers. Like, we actually give credit to the creators. Sorry, I didn't mean to bring in another topic of graphic novels.
No, but that's the business of it. And I think that's the big thing that a lot of people don't realize is that, you know, there's one side of being acknowledged and being credited there. And then the other part is actually having some participation in where the book goes and having the ability to kind of get your property out there. And the tough part that was for me when I did my first book with Ascend with Image, the book sold out worldwide in 4 days. I mean, Yuri was actually there we were doing a big thing at Meltdown Comics, and we had like the Suicide Girls, and we're doing this. And my wife was actually that literally in the middle of our release party, was giving birth to my son, and I had to leave our release party, and I jumped up on the table and I'm screaming out like, I'm having a kid. And Yuri was talking to someone. Do you remember that story, Yuri? Oh,
100%. You know, Meltdown, may she rest in peace. I remember you vaulting the table like a fucking like a cop in a 70s cop show, like, you know, over the hood of the car. You just like, you became a superhero. You got the call, and you were like over the table and screaming, and you ran out the door, and everybody was like, what the fuck just happened? And so I had to explain.
Yuri, and she goes, what? It's like someone having a baby or something? And Yuri's like, actually, he is.
Actually, yeah.
But those were the good old days. And when we started doing that, like, that book took off. It did huge numbers. We had 3 sold out printings of that book. And I had a huge film offer with one of the largest producers in Hollywood. And they were very honest with me. And they're like, you're not going to get to direct it. You're not going to get to write it, and they're going to produce it. And it was like, I created it to be my first film. And I realized that, wow, even though I created something I was so proud of, and it was seemingly so successful, I was not going to be part of it at all. And one of the reasons I did this book and a few of the other books was I was trying to create projects that I could just allow Hollywood to let me go in and try to direct. And even though I'm directing video games and these $100 million productions, moving into the film space is a totally different world, and a lot of creators don't have that opportunity. So it's a really neat time that not only are people starting to acknowledge the voice actors and the artists and the writers and the people who are creating a lot of this content, but now we have a possibility of owning it and participating and getting right to our audience. And even what we're doing right now is talking right directly to the fans. And, you know, that's something that up until the past 10 years hasn't really been an option for most creators.
Yeah.
I know we got to start wrapping things up soon, but if somebody has a question for Yuri in the chat, let me know and I will ask it.
Yeah, I actually have a question for Yuri, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Because I see it from Richard Fearing, and it's something I'm genuinely curious. When people come up to you and say that they hear your voice as this character, and this gentleman is basically saying what you are to Peter Parker and Spider-Man is the equivalent to Kevin Conroy and Batman. And my question to you is like, how does that make you feel? Because that's such a legacy, legendary type casting. And then for people to say that, because like I have my own story with Spider-Man, like just to kind of dovetail into that is like, when I played Spider-Man, that was my first platinum game. And that was a game that I was able to just get lost in that world. Like I've spent hours with you swinging around New York. So I'm curious, like when you hear something like that or read something like that, like how does that make you feel?
You know, I have this weird reaction where I'm afraid to fully let that in because it's so huge. Having grown up the big comic book nerd that I am, it feels like a weird dream that I have yet to wake up from, that any of this is my reality. And for somebody to say, something like that, those are huge words that I have trouble dealing with. I love it, but there's a part of me that'll never believe that that's my reality. Like I feel so fortunate that not only that I got to be a part of a Spider-Man project, but specifically Insomniac's Spider-Man. The storytelling is so great, and there's such a caring, creative, collaborative, group of people that I feel like I won the lottery. And getting to play Spider-Man. Also, I mean, it was terrifying. Like, sure, I was happy when I found out that I'd been cast, but I was also terrified because it's Spider-Man, and I didn't want to mess it up. But I really feel somehow like I won the lottery. And, whenever anybody says something like you just said, Chris, and like Richard Fearing just said, it means the absolute world. And yet I know there's a part of me that's not letting in because it's hard for me to believe. I don't know. It's a very complicated relationship I have with this. Is my answer. I guess.
Also, that we've been working in the industry for so long, and when you have people come up to you and talk to you about how your work has impacted them, you don't really think about your body of work until you actually look back on it. Because, Yuri and I are constantly working from project to project, and we're working with new creators and other collaborators every day. So you're kind of focused on your project. And sometimes you have an amazing experience with someone that is really life-changing. And then you move on to the next project and you don't realize that has impacted millions of people. And they go and they look at your work and they reflect back on it, and they come to you and they say, "You've changed my life, and you've done these different things for us." And it's interesting because Yuri and I both have worked on hundreds, if not thousands, of projects, and it's neat to kind of look back after 20 some odd years and you look at your body of work and you're like, "Oh wow."
It's one of the things I love about going to conventions too. Is we do so much of our work in like a little box, like I'm standing in right now, and it's just like me and Keith or whatever, And then you go to a convention and you actually get to meet people who, have experienced the things that we've worked on and who have, been affected by them. And that's my favorite part, really, to get to feel that and to hear those stories from those people, because everybody's affected differently. And I always love how people find a certain thing, whether it's a comic or a movie or a game, or a podcast or whatever, like finding it at the right time is just like the most beautiful kind of magic, because it might mean nothing to one person and to the other person it saved their life. I mean, it's so great.
And Yuri and I are big nerds too. Like we collect tons of. You should see his man cave. Like Yuri's stuff.
What do you got, Yuri? What do you got?
I wish I could pry this camera off the thing and walk you around my office.
I'll take a tour.
It's right. We'll have to do that sometime. We'll have to figure out a way to do that, because it's it's just one deep cut after another, and of course a whole bunch of Spider-Man stuff. It's weird, but I love it, and it's that kind of magic that I think, and let's not go down this road because it's a long conversation, but I think it's that kind of magic that you will never get from AI generated anything. That's a human and like a very specifically human thing.
Yeah, no, you said it. I think there's something very special about that. Like, well, I'm actually talking to the right person about this. So YouTube has been promoting a lot of these shorts, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I've noticed, and it was actually my wife, I caught her listening to it, was a short, but it was done by an AI voice about comic books. And the video was less than 45 seconds, and it was AI voice just teaching her about I think it was a character. It might have been a video game. And she didn't realize she was listening to an AI voice. And she's like, that's why it was making a couple of mistakes. And that's why it felt like it had no soul. And it's weird because that's what YouTube loves promoting. It's like these shorts. And meanwhile, you have these long videos that are getting less and less promoted because that's how they make their money. That's right. The so it feels nice to hear what you just said about voices, right? Like you can't replicate that with AI, no matter how hard you try.
And that's how many cars and writing and across our whole industry is it's amazing that AI as a tool can empower creatives to be able to do stuff, but the moment it starts replacing creatives, that's where it crosses the line. And so for Yuri and myself working in this industry, like we have to struggle so hard to prove that the creativity of what actors and artists and creators can do every day is going to be something that AI will never be able to do. It can imitate it, but it can't ideate and create these ideas and make the choices that we make. and that's what makes the performances and the artwork so special.
Yeah. Well, I think all people need to do is look at the backlog that both of you have done over the years, whether it's video games or anime or animated shows. And I'll take this as the last question. Is there any other Marvel or DC hero that Yuri would really like to voice or even play in a live action project? Who's your favorite superhero?
Any nerd will tell you can't choose just one. Although some people, are double down on one. The list is way too long because, what Keith said, like we grew up loving this stuff. So there are so many different things that I would love to. I mean, I've been a big Moon Knight stan ever since the 80s, since like Bill Sienkiewicz, Moon Knight, from the 80s. And so like that Moon Knight is finally getting his due in many ways is very happy to me. But I would love to, that would be, that's like a dream character. And on the DC side of that, everybody wants to play Batman at least once. And while
you've come really close, haven't you? Because you played Robin.
See, but that's the thing. My voice tends more towards Robin. I've played so many different versions of Robin at this point, but I'm still chasing that Batman thing. I will always audition, whether or not I get it. I will always audition. And then of course there's all like the weird stuff, the Grendels and the the BPRD. Like BPRD would make like the best TV show in the world.
Oh yeah.
And I would love to be involved in something like that. All that sort of cosmic horror, weird fiction, Lovecraftian, bastard offspring stuff is just a world I love to play in. So like that and superheroes and Doctor Who, man. I always for the longest time I wanted to be like the first American to play the Doctor.
Holy crap! Actually, I could see that, dude.
Isn't it?
I could see that.
There's a short film out there where I did get a chance in a short film to play my version of the Doctor doing a terrible British accent. But
did you do a British accent?
I did. Oh yes.
Oh
yes. That was not me doing a British accent right now. But yeah, no, it's like I love this stuff too much. Like certain things when I get cast, like certain roles get like a special red check to them. When I get to do like a direct to video DC animated film and I get to play this or that. When we worked on The Dark Knight or The Watchmen, animated features, I was like, like that got special love from me and always will. Yeah. And
you do Arcane. I just watched that.
Yeah.
That is such a good show. My brother got me hooked on that.
I know. It's so great. My only beef with Arcane is that people talk about it like they're like, this is the new bar for animation. I'm like, no, it's not. Not everybody has, like infinite resources to create the coolest show of all time. So just don't call it. It's amazing. It's astonishing, piece of art. But it's not the new benchmark. That's not. Everybody can't. Everybody doesn't have the resources.
Everyone can dream.
Yeah. Exactly. It can inspire a new benchmark, but yeah. But it is, yeah. And no, sorry, that my second beef with Arcane is spoiler alert. I thought we were going to be like the leads of the show, and then they killed a bunch of us off in episode 3. So that was a big surprise.
That was the episode that hooked me. That was
okay. There you go. Great.
I was like, oh my gosh, it's going to be that show. Not because they killed off Yuri, but because I didn't know that's where it was going to
go. My job is kind of to get killed off. Keith will attest to this. I've most of the roles I play in video games are people that you kill.
Die very well.
Yeah, I live to die.
My
job security in our industry.
Yeah. I was very blessed many years ago. Oh my gosh, 20 years ago to have interviewed Peter Cullen on a podcast, who's one of my favorite actors. And a big part of my childhood. And one of the things he was telling us about was how he found out they were going to kill Optimus Prime. And he was like, you guys were heartbroken, but I was out of a job.
Right.
And in doing so, they immortalized his character. I mean, because that was the thing. All those kids walked into the theater expecting, they're holding their toys. And I think, the company figured they're going to introduce the next toy line. And yet they made martyrs out of all those characters.
Yeah. Transformers, the movie, blew it all up. Like in so many ways, it changed.
Oh my gosh,
it changed the game.
G.I. Joe, the movie's ending too.
Yeah,
because they did not want to kill Duke off. All right, and gentlemen, what about you two? What are your favorite? Who are your favorite?
I can jump in real quick, and I'll give you more of some oddball answers. One is probably Klaus from Boom Studios, Grant Morrison and Dan Mora. And then I'm going to say maybe Tokyo Ghost, Led Dent with Rick Remender and Sean Gordon Murphy.
Yeah.
And then probably Baltimore, Lord Baltimore from Mike Mignola. I have a hot take. I personally love Baltimore than I love Hellboy, and that's a me thing, I know, but at the same time, it is what it is, and I'm willing to die on that hill.
Dude, I love Lobster Johnson more than I love Hellboy. So
I used to have Lobster Johnson used to be on the wall in the booth behind me, like those. Dark Horse did a run of really good action figures, and they're really like close to Mignola's design. And I had Hellboy and Lobster Johnson like tucked into the wall behind me. And
I love that character.
Did you put those up there because you played those characters? And I'm like, no, it's because I envisioned playing a character like that someday.
Never stop dreaming. Never.
Right?
I'm surprised we don't have an animated series of Hellboy. I know we did like some movies.
The Amazing Screw-On Head was about the most, in my opinion, the most faithful adaptation to his style. But I brought it up once to Mike, and he was like, which is Mike a lot of the time from my experience with him anyway. As much as I love and worship all his stuff.
Oh my gosh, guys, a living legend for sure. Not that you're not, Yuri.
I'd rather be a living legend than a dead one. So I guess. Yeah.
And Keith, what about you? Favorite?
I mean, hands down, Yuri Lowenthal. If ever there's a hero, it's Yuri. No, it's like everything that I've always done. I always try to get Yuri in every one of my projects. Yuri knows this. Like any project I've worked on, I've always brought in Yuri. And as a superhero, and he's rightfully so that he is Spider-Man, because he is a living superhero. It genuinely, in all sense of the word. I grew up with Arkham Asylum, and I always loved the original Dark Knight, and that's kind of what was my influence when I was really into comics, and Batman. It was always there, and even the manifestation of the Joker in how that was always my inspiration for that. And as I got into other series and graphic novels, I always just kept reflecting back on that. And so for me as a creator now, like I kind of channel different types of characters and other things that not just come from sort of the stories I write, but other people that I know and that kind of stuff. So any project I get to bring Yuri Lowenthal in, he's going to be my superhero.
So can I be like your Leo DiCaprio if you're Scorsese? Can
every single one you're going to be.
All right. Okay.
I love this reaction because in the chat, there's different people getting excited about different things, which I'm sure you see a lot, right? Like especially when you go to the con. Oh man, that's my favorite character. This is my favorite voice that you did.
Yeah.
Well, again, I have left a link in the description of the video, but here it is. If you're watching now, that is the link to the Kickstarter. The Kickstarter is open for another how many days, Chris?
37. So we're basically, the Kickstarter is going to end, I believe, April 10th. And Keith is going to be on Game On Expo, I believe, in Arizona before then. And yeah, anything you guys need, just reach out and ask your questions, and I'll be happy to answer them.
Excellent.
Yuri's going to be there too, right?
That's right. I'm going to be at Game On Expo. We'll team up. We'll do something.
Yeah. And Tony Hawk's going to be there too, so we'll do a big reunion.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Anybody going to C2E2? That's where I'll be heading next.
We got to go there. I have not been, but Christopher might be there. So Christopher Shaw might be there. So Chris might be able to do some stuff, and we're going to be having some new announcements with Christopher Shaw too. So he'll probably be there.
Awesome. Gentlemen, I just want to thank you for your time. I want to thank everybody for watching. This has been an absolute blast. Just reliving a lot of memories of voices I've heard Yuri do, and just talking about comics. My gosh. They know that you guys were huge into graphic novels and comics for such a long time. You did some deep dives there, my dude, with
Mage and
I was
Nexus and
I was like people have no idea how long we waited for Mage 2. Like no idea.
Right? I know. And then I don't know if he's talked about it or not, but what was the Kevin Smith movie with Matt Damon, Ben Affleck as angels, and
Dogma?
Dogma. That had to have been heavily influenced by Mage. Like it felt like it had. I mean, I'm pretty sure Kevin was probably a huge fan, but like that felt like it was his version of that. It was like, I know I won't be able to get the rights to that, but I'm gonna do my own version of that.
Yeah, I can see. I mean, he even looks like Wagner. Like, anyway,
I
thank you everybody for watching. Hit that like button and check out the Kickstarter that is going on for about 37 more days.
7 more days.
More days.
All right. Any last words, gentlemen, before we?
Hey guys, thank you guys for supporting us. This is a great journey for us, and thank you for having us on. This is it's wonderful to be working with our friends, and it's great to get out to our fans. And I hope the campaign is successful.
Awesome.
Read comics, play games, be kind to each other. These are like my 3 favorite things.
Kind